Hi there, and welcome to Ancestral Recall. I'm your host, Eli Kaplan. Ancestral Recall is a Magic YouTube series exploring the history of Magic the Gathering, set by set. I've been playing since the release of Unlimited in 1993, and have written event coverage for the official Magic the Gathering homepage, as well as articles for Mind Ripper and Star City Games. And today we're going to talk about one of the most important, yet misunderstood sets in Magic's history, Legends. Legends is Magic's fourth expansion and the first large set to be released after Revised. It features many creative concepts and introduced one of Magic's most flavorful and exciting rules, the legendary supertype, as well as two of Magic's most perplexing keywords. It's also distinct in not depicting a single world or plane, but snapshots, but many of Richard Garfield's friends' homebrewed tabletop role-playing campaigns. As such, Legends is the most fanish of Magic's expansions, and it depicts many classic fantasy concepts. Legends also was conceived without too much thought for the tournament balance, and created many problem children cards that left a huge footprint on the future of Magic. Let's talk about this absolutely crucial set, which was designed by Steve Conrad and Robert Hebert, along with Scaff Elias, in charge of development. In late spring of 1994, a revised edition had finally come out, and while it was flying off the shelves, there were a lot of expectations about being the regular version of Magic boosters that would normally be available. Revised edition had a bunch of interesting cards from Arabian Nights and Antiquities, replacing some of the most broken cards from ABU in it, like the Moxen. And Revised also looked terribly washed out in comparison to the colors of Unlimited's more vivid cards. So the idea of a huge expansion, the largest set to date with 310 cards, including actual rares as well as uncommons, as opposed to Arabian Nights and Antiquities' multiple levels of uncommons, was incredibly exciting. And these boosters, unlike Revised or ABU boosters, didn't even have basic lands, which was a mixed blessing because lands at the time were hard to come by for quite a few players. There was a major problem with some of the Legends print run, where boxes only contained one of two halves of the uncommon run, but the ones in my local store didn't have that problem, and I bought close to a full box of Legends. And when you're a junior high school student, that was a lot of money at the time, even if they cost $2.49. I traded for a playset of Chains of Mephistopheles and ran with Howling Mines as one of my very first control decks. Don't ask me how it works, because at the time, I didn't know what I was doing. Anyway, the set had a rules insert card in every booster, which explained how Legends worked. Now, if one player controlled a Legend, the other player couldn't play a copy, and the controller couldn't play a second copy. There were no rules for multiple copies being in play because the assumption was, well, under the rules it can't happen because all Legends were restricted, with only one being allowed in a deck. Not one Legend total, but one of each individual Legend card. But anyway, that was the first version of the Legends rule. And the Duelist Convocation said you could only run one copy of a Legend in a deck. Why? Well, they're legendary, they're special. And that was the attempt on how to handle to have multiples in play. But with spells like Clone and Vespian Doppelganger flying around, well, the rules got a lot more complex. And that was part of the reasons why Clone spells got the kibosh for a while. At least, so I speculate. I know, I'm already jumping into the new mechanics. But where did these Legends come from? Now, the set wanted to tell the stories of Magic's heroes and arch-villains. But there was a problem with that idea. Magic already had a hero. Banalish Hero, the mighty 1/1 from ABU. It was a marquee card from the original set with some great artwork and a very specific, flavorful white ability. So instead of being a set about heroes, the set was renamed Legends, as the truncated form of the set's design document name, The Legends Continue. And the Legends were cards based on the designer's D&D campaigns. The Lady of the Mountain was a level 25, insanely statted evil NPC sorcerer, the end boss and nemesis of a high-level campaign. Ojenen was a catfolk warrior. Nebuchadnezzar was, well, a real-world historical reference? Wizards kind of feels uncomfortable doing those. Ramirez de Pietro was a D&D PC of a pirate of one of the lead designers. And the Elder Dragons were inspired by some of the avatars of the fundamental forces of the universe of the world of the Primal Order, Peter Adkinson's own RPG that was Wizards' first product. The artists had a lot of dubious art descriptions given to them, which led to some decisions that may have been unpopular. The lead designer was upset that the presence of the Master, a card which was supposed to show the influence of a powerful deity, came in with a portrait of Albert Einstein, the most famous real-world person to appear on a Magic card. And Harold McNeil, an artist who had strong sympathies for white supremacist movements, sent in the card heroically depicting agents of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan in arguably favorable lights. Now, I happen to admire Einstein, and I abhor the KKK for their absolutely vile, hateful agenda, but with the slack of a slush artwork pile, these pieces ran in the set due to being produced on a tight schedule. So let's get right into the mechanics. Let's start off with the big one. Let's start off with legendary creatures. This mechanic was such a hit that a few years later, almost every set of Magic had at least one legend, and some sets had lots. Legends are creatures that are distinct from others, representing a single unique creature, such as Solkanar, the Swamp King, or a unique artifact, such as the Mirari, or a unique land, such as Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth, or an enchantment, such as Knights of Souls Betrayal. The big focus was legendary creatures, which are the linchpin of the extremely popular casual formats Elder Dragon Highlander, also known as EDH or Commander. We're talking the creme de la creme of the universe, the most powerful warriors and wily spellcasters of the planes. Barring the old planeswalkers, legends are an unsurpassed elite class of creatures. That's the flavor, and here's the nuts and bolts. Today's legendary mechanics have evolved a ton from when they first showed up in 94. In 94, legendary cards were restricted for a few months in that you couldn't play more than one per deck. But that restriction soon got lifted in a few months for being too arbitrary and for helping to make deck builders' lives difficult. Originally, if you control the legend, no other player in the game could cast another copy of that legend, and copies of that legend would die as a state-based effect, leaving the original standing. Later on, with 2003's Champions of Kamigawa, we got the next version of the rule which said that if a second copy of the legend hit the table, it would destroy all cards with the same name as well as itself. Much later on, with Magic 2014, Wizards decided to let this rule go, saying instead that each player could control up to one version of a legendary card, though extra copies on the same side of the table still died. And that's where we are today. And now we'll start with the creature legends, the game's first multicolored spells. The multicolored spells, or gold spell rules, are the same today as they were at the time, counting as both colors when cast, and in any zone. And many of the legends were essentially more crawworms, big hefty creatures with vanilla stats, at uncommon. Crawworm. I know. I often like to call any giant vanilla creature a crawworm. They're not all 6'4", some of them are 5'5" or 5'7". But there's more to these legends. They could team up with banding with other legends, thanks to an uncommon cycle that bands with other lands. Many of the rare legends have bigger stats and cool and interesting activated abilities, and there's so many of them, so we're going to save them for the third part of this set profile, including their cycles. Sorry to tease, but we will revisit them soon, I promise. The uncommon legendary lands represented key locations in Dominaria and provided colored mana plus another ability. Tolaria could prompt creatures' distrust by removing banding. Urborg could sink a creature's Swamp Walk or First Strike in the mire. Hammerheim could shut down the Landwalker's evasion. The most popular in the cycle for many years, Pendelhaven, can turn any 1/1 creature into a 2/3 until the end of turn, and represented this cycle as a reprint on Time Spiral's time-shifted sheet. Pendelhaven is even legal in Modern, thanks to Time Spiral. And Caracas turned into a powerhouse with the introduction of more and more legends, and became an essential in Legacy and Vintage as well as other formats. Bouncing a legend for the mere cost of tapping a solitary land is just crazy. And the most broken land in this set is the Tabernacle of Pendrell Vale, which forces all creatures to have an upkeep cost of 1 colorless. This taxing effect is completely brutal in group games, and good against so many different strategies in the game that Wizards recognize that it shouldn't get printed again. And it's also why the card is so freaking expensive. While Legendary appeared in the land subtype, that wasn't the case for the actual creature legends, which lacked any other creature type except for the Elder Dragon legends. At least they got to count as dragons. Okay, we'll take a look at just a few legends today, those Elder Dragons, the original Elder Dragons of Magic. Each of them is a 7/7 flying creature for 8 mana with a 3 mana upkeep built in, so they're terrible in Momir Basic, as anyone who plays cheaply on Magic Online can tell you. We'll start off with Arcades Saboth, the least deadly, least murderous Elder Dragon. He comes with a castle effect and holy armor. Maybe he's the good guy of the cycle. Chromium is the blue-aligned Elder Dragon and comes with Rampage? Why? What color loves dealing with multiple blockers by overpowering them more than blue? Flavor fail, folks. Palladium Morse at least comes with Trample, thank goodness. Vivictus Asmati can use 3 different forms of mana to fuel his fire breathing, so he's got a very spicy breath weapon. And Nicol Bolas? Well, here's a standout of the cycle. This guy appears first as an elderly, wizened dragon who would rather spend his time reading books than collecting treasure or burninating towns. And yet, if he hits you, you discard your hand. Ugh. The color combination was very potent at the time, the home of the best removal, so Nicol Bolas was the only one who saw any tournament play. Thankfully, this manipulator who always plays for the long game got a Planeswalker card in Conflux, the first confirmed Old Walker to get the new treatment. And in 2017, he gets a star in Amonkhet and Hour of Devastation. So yeah, this is the treasure trove of Magic lore that hails from 1994. Nicol Bolas may be the most badass character in all of Magic, and that's not a sentence I can say lightly. And I can't wait to see what his next Planeswalker card looks like. The next mechanic also dwells within the type line, the Enchant Worlds, later renamed World Enchantments. These enchantments appeared for a few years before retiring, and like Legends, there could only be one Enchant World in play. However, that meant that any new Enchant World cast, even with a different name, would destroy the previous one when it entered the battlefield. The most famous of these was Concordant Crossroads, which gave all creatures haste. Concordant Crossroads was a crucial component in many early aggro decks, but it wasn't the most powerful. The 2 most powerful Enchant Worlds were in black. Nethervoid, which forced players to pay 3 mana in addition to each spell's original mana cost. This powerful effect was miserable and inspired by ABU's Gloom, except it hit all players and all spells. The other was the Abyss, which forced players to destroy non-black creatures they control every upkeep. Not all colors had the same number of world enchantments, so I wouldn't call these cycles per se. In terms of flavor, world enchantments could be a major planar overlay, like the Wrathy overlay on Dominaria, or it could be construed as the dual shifting locations. The idea of only one being allowed at a time was a cool spin on the Legends rule, and no doubt helped to inspire the plane chase mechanic. And I do think it's worth pointing out that the best enchantment in Legends, arguably, is not an enchant world. Our next mechanic is Bands with Others, which is a limited form of banding. For those of you who don't know how banding works, I'll give you a link to my ABU White Retrospective, which does a good job of laying it out. And explaining how banding works itself is tedious, as anyone who has done it can tell you, but Bands with Others is an even more narrow concept, since normal banding on offense works in concert with any number of banders plus 1 non-bander, while Bands with Others is its own ability, which does not allow it to cooperate with any non-bander. And strangely enough, there are no creatures that come with Bands with Other on its own. Master of the Hunt made Wolves of the Hunt tokens, which had Bands with Other Wolves of the Hunt. And there was a cycle of lands that let legendary creatures of a color band with other legendary creatures of that same color. Call me crazy, but I want to try Adventurer's Guildhouse in the Captain Sisay decks. Black legendary creatures that weren't also green couldn't get inside the Adventurer's Guild. Snooty jerks. The other keyworded ability in Legends was Magic's first new keyworded ability outside ABU, Rampage. This appeared in text boxes. Rampage came with a number, and it indicated that in combat, if more than one creature blocked this creature would get a +X pump until end of turn for each creature blocking it past the first. So, if Craw Giant attacks, and gets blocked by a freshly summoned Juggernaut, it stays at 6/4 trampling self, and they trade, that's that. But if Craw Giant gets lured, and then gets blocked by 3 lumbering Hill Giants, that Craw Giant gets +6/+6 for being blocked by 3 creatures. That's 2 instances of +3/+3. Add Trample onto that, and you have a green combo deck that many people tried to pull off. It didn't really work, just a single Terror or Swords of Plowshares will just throw that plan just totally off the rails, but that didn't stop green players from trying. Rampage made it into the Ice Age and Mirage rulebooks, and managed to stick around through Mirage Block and a few jokey references in the unsets. Only 14 creatures bore the mechanic in black-bordered Magic. Though Wizards retired the keyword, its spirit does appear in non-keyboarded form later on with cards like Elvish Berserker. And the Craw Giant did manage to show up in the time-shifted sheet as well. A lot of the Dungeons & Dragons flavor does shine through in Legends cycles. We'll start off with the Glyph cycle. Power words written on walls as traps to harm any who haplessly manage to end up looking at a wall. Yeah, DMs. Glyphs suck as far as traps go. Hey, I walked down this hallway. Oh, you got hit by a glyph. It sucks. So, the glyphs in Magic are all connected to walls that have ridiculously overpowered effects. Glyph of Reincarnation transmogrifies a blocked creature into something else from its controller's graveyard. Glyph of Destruction pumped the wall +10/+0, but also ensured the wall's destruction afterward because that kind of power can't be harnessed easily. Glyph of Doom kills a blocked creature, though it could regenerate. Yeah, I think this effect would have been fine with the clause about regeneration. Glyph of Delusion keeps a creature tapped down for some number of turns based on its power, though if the creature had Vigilance, this instant just became pointless. And Glyph of Life is a life gain spell, and yet it doesn't actually preserve the blocking wall in any way. Honestly, Glyphs are one of early Magic's worst cycles, and Wizards has wisely avoided printing too many effects on interactions with walls or defenders. But hey, it was a good callback to one of the most aggravating D&D tropes ever. Speaking of narrow cycles, there was a cycle of enchantments that shut off the various Landwalk abilities. Forest Walk? Well, Shannon Dryads existed, and Green also got a bunch of later Forest Walkers. Swamp Walk? Well, Bog Wraith was a very common sight in sideboards in those days, believe it or not. Island Walk? Lord of Atlantis had a shortage of followers at the time, but it was conceivable. Well, just to stress the idea of everything being mutable and alterable in Magic, we had enchantments that could block you off with Landlock. And just in order to stop a single rare imprint at time that also debuted in Legends, we got Great Wall. Righteous Avengers, you know where Legend stands against you. Suck it. Planeswalk is a ridiculous ability in the first place, after all. How exactly are you supposed to walk through flat, sparsely vegetated territory that stretches as far as the eye can see? Maybe amber waves of grain might help, but you'd have to be pretty sure to get through. Like a Zodiac chicken. Yeah, that guy has an excuse. Though I have a hard time seeing a chicken with 2/1 stats. Chickens should not be able to trade in combat with grizzly bears. In spring of 1994, people had long figured out that the Moxen and Soul Ring and Black Lotus were broken. So the prospect of adding more artifact mana to the environment was a dangerous one. Legends included an uncommon cycle of mana batteries, which could tap to add mana to your pool or add storage counters to let you bank mana for later use. Red X-Spell kitchen table decks tried these out on rare occasions, but they turned out to be terrible. The next fair, playable colored mana artifact sources came in Mirage with the Diamond cycle, which went over far better without getting out of hand. Oh yeah. And there was one other sneaky mechanic that had introduced itself in Legends that got a little traction in other early expansions before sleeping for many years: Poison. Pit Scorpion, a 1/1 for 2B that dealt this strange form of counter to players on top of regular damage, was complemented by a rare artifact token producer, Serpent Generator, that spat out poisonous snakes. Ooh, snakes. Why do 10 poison counters lead to a game over? That's a great question. Now, poison was the first alternate win condition of Magic, but at the time, almost no one tried it out because there just wasn't enough support for it to happen. The Dark's Marsh Viper well, that allowed it to try to pay off, but it wasn't a thing. And it really didn't happen at all until about a decade later when the Sliver Kids took down the first two-headed giant Pro Tour thanks to Venomous Sliver in Future Sight. Mark Rosewater had a curiosity for this mechanic's potential, which bloomed into one of the core mechanics of Scars of Mirrodin Block. Poison's legacy is noteworthy indeed. There's also a tribe I want to talk about. Have you ever wondered why Magic's most prolific red race, goblins, don't have red skin? Usually they're green. The cards are red, but their hides are green. Lorwyn, Tarkir, and Kamigawa are notable exceptions. Well, what if I told you that there was an earlier attempt at a refined, red-skinned, cheap red tribe? The kobolds showed up in Legends, and nowhere else except for the Time Spiral Timeshifted sheet. Kobolds are famous in Dungeons & Dragons for being the absolute wimpiest creatures in the game, with half a hit die in the original red box. Using 2nd edition Advanced D&D, the default most popular RPG in 1993, goblins get a hit die -1, or at least they did at the time. But you could have a default goblin with 7 hit points, whereas kobolds maxed out at 4. Usually when the DM was using kobolds, they made up for the creature's weaknesses by using clever tactics and traps. In D&D, kobolds are actually much more lizard-like and vaguely related to dragons, whereas goblins are more bestial and squat. While Magic's early goblins were visually influenced by Games Workshop's Orc Boys with their green skins, the red kobolds end up handicapped by their incredibly weak stats. That's why no one remembers them. Kobolds are first non-artifact, 0-mana creatures, and they were 0-1s. But they had a pair of uncommons and a rare lord that could bolster their stats. The mightiest kobold, who was like unto a god to them, was Rogav Carekeep, who gave his particular followers +2/+2. If you failed to pay Rogav's cost, he and his entire tribe would defect to your opponent. Sadly, unlike most of his tribe, Rogav failed to have his characteristic hue. Okay, we're going to call it a day here, but we'll be back with 2 more episodes. Next time, we're going to be looking at some of the individual non-legendary powerful cards in the 5 colors. So if you want to check it out, just wait a week or 2. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I know it's been a while since I put out the show, and we'll be keeping up a fairly regular schedule over the next couple months. And if you enjoyed this show, please subscribe if you haven't already, hit that like button, and leave a comment and tell me what was good, what didn't work, what you want to hear, and your thoughts about Legends itself. Thanks. This is Eli Kaplan for Ancestral Recall, signing off. Good games, and good luck.